Okay, we are live. Welcome to the April 13th, 2023 Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee meeting. My name is Becca Meekins. I'm the Assistant Town Administrator. With me, I have Kristen Black, the Health Director for the Town of Northborough, as well as Lori Connors, the Planning Director. So the first item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes from last year's pre-town meeting. Pre-town meeting of the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I will move to approve the minutes.
I'll
Motion
second.
by Andrea, seconded by Brian. Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor by roll call? Andrea,
Yes. In
Brian,
favor.
Yes.
and Megan.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So moving into the bulk of our agenda. So just so everybody understands, the role of the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee is to consider proposed changes to town meeting of the code and bylaws and make recommendations to town meeting on those proposed changes. So today what we're going to do is walk through all of the articles that contain any proposed change to the code or bylaw. I have several other staff here who will be available to speak to articles relative to their department. And then if you all have questions, we can certainly get those addressed. So jumping right into it, Article 9 considers the creation of a health department revolving fund. I'm actually going to turn it right over to Kristen Black, who's our health director, and she can give you a little bit of background on this.
Great. Thank you very much, Becca. It's nice to meet all of you. So I'd just like to walk you through quickly. So this is Article 9 of the meeting warrant. It's to establish a health department revolving fund. Many health departments in the state of Massachusetts do have a revolving fund. It's really to receive program fees or medical insurance reimbursements, and then to expend those funds on program expenses for the like. There's many towns, departments that currently do this exact same thing in the town of Northborough. Our Council on Aging runs programming, receives fees, and uses that money to then run the next program and sustain these programs in the future. Our fire department does the same as well. There's also the community affairs has a revolving fund, the library, and family and youth services. So the health department, I've been here for just over 2 years. We have not really had a need for this in the past. We had a department of about 1.5 people to 2 people full-time in the health department. We didn't really offer programming. As some of you may be aware, we've grown exponentially, it feels like, in the last 2 years. We have added a new partnership, a greater partnership for public health, where we're providing services, public health services to Northborough, Southborough, Westborough, and Boylston. We've added 3 full-time staff, and we've added an additional 4 part-time staff. And that's all done through state grants. We've been running, bigger and expanded flu clinics every year. The last 2 years, we've done a large drive-through flu clinic at Algonquin Regional High School. So we're really trying to offer expanded health programming in the area. Some of this we've done most recently through the Be Well Northborough initiative. We're running discounted CPR and AED training at our local libraries, et cetera, free Narcan training for the public. So my goal in this warrant article, it was unanimously supported by the Board of Health, and I'm very much in support of it, is that we would establish a revolving fund identical to the other departments in town that would let us to receive fees and then help to run more programs. So it really doesn't affect the general fund. This article is written is not going to fund this account. It would just establish it in which we could receive fees and then eventually build the ability to offer the programming. So I don't know if you have any questions. I hope I've sort of explained what we're looking to do. My goal is to build sustainable public health services and programming in the region. I think this is an integral part, and it really doesn't cost the taxpayers anything. So I just want to clarify one last point is this doesn't change the way we receive our existing permit fees. So just like the building department, which is connected with the health department, we have always received fees for food permits, for septic permits, for wells, for all of those things. They all get deposited into the general fund and that will stay the same. Again, this article is to only receive program fees or medical reimbursements for, flu clinics, for example, into this fund. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have one. So I'm noticing the expenditure limit when it's not going to be directly funded. If the town's not funding it directly, will the exponential limit be limiting how much you guys are allowed to spend, or what does it mean there? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think, there was some confusion. There was an incorrectly printed first version of this warrant article before the Board of Selectmen where it was written that it was to appropriate $150,000 to this health department revolving account. And that was a typo. So I just want to clarify, this is not appropriation. The expenditure limit, it's a require under Mass General Law. So we are creating this article is in accordance with this. It's a 53.5 account, and it's very specific for any municipality that has one of these revolving accounts. You have to have an expenditure limit. So if you were to look at the town warrant right now, article number 10 has the expenditure limit for all other revolving funds in the town. And that has to be in the town warrant and voted every single year. So what's the most you could spend? And so I threw out a number of 150. I honestly pulled it out of a hat because we had to come up with a cap. So the cap for the senior center is 300. So it's about half of that. And the cap for our fire department is $750,000. So it's only 20% of that. And, I know some departments like library, community affairs have a much lower cap of $20,000 a year. My thought is the health department does deal with pandemics, emergency response. And I think, it would be a tool for us to respond to an emergency if there were funds available and it would be appropriate. But again, it's just an expenditure limit. There's no money there now. I don't think we're going to ever be touching that cap, probably never in the future, but we really don't know how it's used. So I hope that answers your question, Brian.
It does. No further questions.
Can you explain how the fees will be collected and what type of fees will be placed on the community?
So we've always run our flu clinics for free, our COVID clinics for free, right? COVID was provided, the vaccine's free from the government, for example. So we wouldn't plan to change that. This would just give us the ability to receive medical reimbursements. And so right now we don't, we haven't received them for flu in the past. And so we don't bill the insurance, but, this wouldn't be billing the individuals, right? The residents that would come to the clinic, for example. So our goal is to I'll give you the example. One thought I had is we're currently offering reduced cost CPR classes right now through Be Well Northborough at the library. They've been really successful. They're filling right up. I think we're going to have 4 months. We're offering 2 CPR, AED classes. And so the way we're doing it with Be Well right now is that we have it costs about $60 a person to bring in the third party to offer the course. We collect $30 from the residents, and Be Well is funding the other half, the other $30. So we're offering them a reduced cost. One thing we're looking to, the state is willing to, under one of our state grants, pay to have all of our nurses trained to teach CPR. So one thought is that we could use our staffing to offer a discounted course and then maybe just charge a resident, again, $30, the reduced cost to get the card issued from American Heart Association, but it would be our staff time, and that's similar to how the fire department's done some of that in the past. So again, with our staff, we can offer something at a much lower rate than a private group. And so that's sort of some of the ideas we're thinking about, is that we could receive that money and that would cover the program cost so we can continue to offer it. Right now, if I wanted to offer, let's say Be Well funding wasn't there and we said, we want to offer this course at a reduced cost to residents, we think it's really valuable in the community. I don't have a line item in the Board of Health budget for any programming. So the answer is we're not going to offer it. There's no way. We don't, in some of these programs like CPR, AD training, it's through a third party. You have to have the certification through American Red Cross or, American Heart Association, and there's always a fee associated. And so that would cover some of those costs, for example.
Thanks, Kristen. Are there any other questions about Article 9 from the committee? No? Okay. Do we have a motion? Recommendation for Article 9.
I will have a motion to support Article 9, which is the establishment of a revolving health fund.
Motion made to support by Andrea. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Megan. Any further discussion or questions for Kristen?
No.
Okay. By roll call, Andrea,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
and Brian.
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you, Kristen. The Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee has supported Article 9, which is the establishment of the revolving fund. This will be printed on their recommendations and supplied to town meeting on the evening of town meeting. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you all. Thank you for your support. We'll see you coming.
Thank you, Kristen.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna move right into the next item, which is Article 14, which is an article proposing changes to the senior tax relief options in town. Section 41A of Mass General Law provides that cities and towns can provide tax deferral to seniors for their property tax. This is something that the Board of Selectmen asked staff to investigate last year in terms of trying to provide additional relief to seniors in an ever rising property tax market and inflation overall. I think it's clearly becoming more challenging every day to live on a fixed income. So that's something that the board is well aware of. So staff came back, made a recommendation to the board that they consider increasing the income threshold for that program. So right now, the income threshold for the 41A program is set at the state law default, which is $20,000 per household. Obviously, that's an incredibly low threshold for anybody, let alone seniors who are living on fixed income. So the proposal is to increase that threshold from $20,000 to $64,000 per household, which is actually the maximum allowable under law. In addition to increasing the income threshold, there's a proposal to reduce the interest rate. So right now, the interest rate on that deferral is 8%. That is also the default that was set by law and was in place when the town adopted tax deferral 41A. And the proposal is to cut that in half and go to 4%. So the way that it works essentially is that qualifying residents can submit an application if they meet the requirements, the income thresholds. Their property tax is essentially, a lien is essentially placed on the home, the tax is deferred, and then upon sale or conveyance, those taxes have to be paid along with the interest. So there's a memo that was provided by the finance director in your packet. There's a few comps in there so you can get an idea of what surrounding communities do. But, you know, in the interest of trying to provide relief to seniors who are living on fixed incomes, I think that's really the purpose of this article. And the Board of Selectmen did vote unanimously in favor of putting this forward to town meeting. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions if you have them.
I have none. Is it too early to motion to approve?
If that's your motion, I second it, Brian.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Motion made by Brian, seconded by Andrea. Any further discussion or questions?
No.
Okay, by roll call vote, Andrea,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
and Brian.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Article 27. This I think is a pretty self-explanatory, but just so that the public can sort of hear the rationale. Article 27 proposes changing the current title of the executive body of the town, so that is the Board of Selectmen, and changing their title to Select Board. This is something that there is becoming more and more common throughout the Commonwealth. Lots of cities and towns have already done this. The Mass Municipal Association changed their Board of Selectmen Association to the Select Board Association in 2020. Obviously, there's been a push to utilize more gender inclusive language. We all know that men are not the only ones who serve on elected boards anymore. And I think this is really just an effort to be more inclusive and recognize that, you know, times have changed and our language really should reflect that change. So this article was put on the warrant by the board. The board voted unanimously in favor of this warrant article. In terms of the changes, you know, it will require that we update our code language, our bylaw language, you know, our website, all of our correspondence. But, you know, we'll be able to do that with the staff will be able to make those changes along with the support of a consultant. And we have there's existing funding to do that. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
No, just I always thought the man suffix stood for human, but if the Board of Selectmen or potentially select board voted for it for themselves, I mean, it's their position, so I would approve.
I will second if that's Brian's motion.
Motion made by Brian, seconded by Andrea. Any further discussion or questions from the membership?
No.
Okay, roll call vote. Andrea?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Moving right along, Article 28. I think this is pretty self-explanatory as well, so this article has been placed on the warrant by the Board of the Board of Selectmen, soon to be Select Board, and it proposes removing the residency requirement for the town administrator position. So our current charter, which was voted into law in 1970, requires that our town administrator be a resident of Northborough upon hire. That is, I would say it was very common in 1970 for cities and towns to require that the chief administrative officer reside in town. But over the years, most communities have done away with it simply because market competition. In 1970, many households were single income households. That's obviously changed. Most families are dual income. So there are two careers that you have to think about. Obviously, it's a challenge to relocate families. The housing market can be another impediment. And so, for the first time in 15 years, Northborough is looking for its next town administrator. When our previous town administrator, John Cordero, was appointed, he was already a resident of Northborough. He happened to live in town. In the interest of getting the most qualified candidate to be our next town administrator, I think it really makes sense to remove the residency requirement. And just, for data purposes, there are only 12 communities in Massachusetts that still have residency requirements, and Northborough is one of them. So the majority of cities and towns have done away with that. The Board of Selectmen did vote unanimously in favor of passage of this article as well. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Are we getting rid of section 2 as well? The first sentence of section 4.1, the one where they have to move within 12 months of being appointed. Are we getting rid of that part?
Yes, yeah. So they will not have to live in Northborough to serve at any time. And that's really, it is becoming very common, in the interest of market competition, to make yourselves competitive and to get the best candidate possible. You really, people don't want to uproot their families and move. It's a challenge. And I think that's sort of just the direction that the profession has gone in.
Becca, you may not have the answer to this, but how many communities were looked at? I know you gave us the number of 12 communities that still do this. 12 out of how many? Yeah,
it was a survey that was completed by a consulting firm for another community that was at the time also looking to remove their residency
Okay.
requirement. And I believe that there were 152 communities surveyed at that time. So of the 152, 12 of them had residency requirements, and Northborough was one of those.
I think it's a double-edged sword, because I waver between, I want someone to live in the town to have more, you know, to have more meat in the game, so to speak, because if you live in the town, you're going to do the best that you can for the town. But I also know that it has to be balanced with, you know, if we open it up, we will get more potential individuals who could probably do the same thing. So I'm on the fence, but I will propose a motion to support Article 28 and do away with the residency requirement.
I second that.
Motion made by Andrea to support Article 28, seconded by Megan. Is there any further discussion or questions?
I do just have that. I believe it is the highest paid position in town, and Northborough is a pretty successful town of highly educated people, mostly thanks to the school district. I feel like smaller towns might benefit from this a lot, but I feel like Northborough doesn't need it as badly. That's my comment.
Any further comments or questions?
No.
By roll call, Andrea,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
and Brian.
No.
Okay, motion passes 2-1 with Megan and Andrea in favor and Brian opposed. Thank you all. Okay, moving on. Article 29 is the personnel bylaw amendment. So this is something that's done every year. This year, the changes are pretty straightforward. There are no additional positions being proposed, no classification changes for any existing positions. The proposed cost of living increase is 2% for non-union employees starting July 1. That is the result of a formula that is in our bylaw that states that non-union employees will receive the average increase of all the union cost of living increases. We did settle all the union contracts this year, and every union is getting 2% in July 1 as cost of living. So that would mean 2% for non-union. The only change I would say is that we're proposing to increase the van driver salaries for the senior center. These are non-merit based positions. So what that means is they don't get increases consistent with non-union. It's basically based upon the market. And typically, they're part-time positions. Typically, we're hiring retirees, retired public safety, and they spend, between, depending on their schedule, 10 and 15 hours a week driving one of the WRTA buses for the senior center. And they pick up residents and bring them to, appointments and so forth. That program is fully supported by funds from the WRTA. So the town has a contract with the WRTA to provide those transportation services. And so any wage increases are covered within that contract. So, proposing to increase the salaries of the van drivers has zero impact on the taxpayers of Northborough because the funding will be fully reimbursed by the WRTA for us providing that service to the residents. So that's the explanation for the van driver increase. And aside from that, there are no changes being proposed on any of the positions, the classification or the grading of any of the positions. So I'm happy to take questions on Article 29 if you have any.
I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
So how often is the contract with the WRTA reviewed?
Annually. It's an annual agreement.
Okay, so is the contract such that it says whatever your rate is for a van driver, we're going to pay it?
Yeah.
Or is there some negotiation that goes on between the WRTA and what the town has there for a salary for the drivers?
That's a good question. So the RTA contract does say we will reimburse you whatever you pay your van drivers. It also says what there is an average hourly wage that's included in the contract to provide for estimates, but it's billed, they reimbursed based on actual billed. So the contract has an estimate with a do not exceed. And then as we bill the WRTA based on, you know, the hours that are worked, they reimburse them. So what will happen is if this is approved at town meeting and as we move into contract negotiations with the RTA for the upcoming year, because that contract has not been negotiated yet, the changes to those van driver wages will be incorporated into that new agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
With that, I will throw out a motion to support Article 29.
Second.
Motion made by Andrea to support Article 29, seconded by Brian. Is there any further discussion or questions?
No.
By roll call vote, Andrea,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
and Brian.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. I am actually going to hand it over now to Fred. Fred is going to talk to you a little bit about Article 36, which is related to the Earthwork Board. Fred?
Thank you, Becca. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me today. Article 36 is broken up into two small parts. The first is, they're both basically housekeeping. A couple of years ago, we, as a town, adopted a land disturbance and stormwater bylaw as part of our national pollution discharge elimination program with the federal government. That required projects that are going to disturb more than 1 acre of land to get a land disturbance and stormwater bylaw permit from the Conservation Commission. At the time, we should have, and I missed it, included an exemption in the earthwork bylaw, which is separate from zoning. It's a standalone bylaw, as you know. And all projects that are exceeding 100 cubic yards of material either entering the site or leaving the site are required to get an earthwork permit. They have very similar conditions. The land disturbance permit is more comprehensive and has to do with stormwater control post-construction. So it's appropriate for larger projects to get this permit and not be required to get the same basic permit during construction from the Earthwork Board. Both have the ability to require the applicant to post a bond for stabilization of the site in the event that they were to walk away or have a catastrophe of erosion during construction of the project. But the land disturbance permit also carries with it ongoing maintenance and evaluation of the stormwater system and reporting to the Conservation Commission. So it's appropriate that they be the one to issue that permit, and the earthwork permit is somewhat redundant. So presently, we've had a couple of projects that exceed the 1 acre disturbance threshold, and so we've been requiring them to get both permits, but eliminating the bond requirement from the Earthwork Board if they have a bond with the Conservation Commission permit. The second part of that article is really just a correction from many years ago. We had required the earthwork permit to be issued by the planning board in order to streamline the process of permitting industrial projects or projects in the industrial district. Several years after that, it seemed it wasn't working as well. We went back to town meeting and eliminated that. And this line in the section 2-28-040 just eliminates the planning board from that process. So that one truly is housekeeping. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. I see nods going, heads going like this. Okay. Hopefully it'll be that smooth at town meeting.
So I will present a motion to support Article 36.
Second.
Motion made by Andrea, seconded by Brian to support Article 36. Are there any further questions or discussions on the article? Okay. By roll call vote, Andrea,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
and Brian?
Yes.
Okay, Fred, thank you.
I will stick around for moral support for Lori if she needs some, but I'm going to mute myself. So wave to me if you need me, and I will. I can hear you, but I'll be here. Thank you. Appreciate it. See you all at town meeting.
Thanks, Fed. All right, without further ado, I am going to turn the bulk of this meeting over to Lori Connors, who is our planning director. She is going to guide you through Articles 37 through 49, which are all zoning bylaw articles. So, Lori, the floor is yours.
Great. I thought that it might be easier if I share the PowerPoint presentation that I prepared for town meeting. There are some photos in the presentation that will help articulate it, show you what is meant by the various articles. So with your permission, I'm going to share my screen. All right, can you see that?
Yeah, you might want to change it to presenter view, Lori.
Okay. I'm just going to actually do a slideshow. All right, there we go. So the first three articles that I wanted to talk to you about is simple articles having to do with definitions. So the first article, Article 37, is to create a definition for transient. So this was actually presented by the building inspector, these three definition changes. And he wanted to ensure that the definitions that we have in the zoning bylaw coincide with the definitions that appear in the building code. So does anybody have any questions about the definition for transient?
My only question is, when he says coincide, will these be equal definitions, like the exact same?
It's, you know, I don't know if it's a word for word, you know, exactly the same, but the terminology, the meaning is the same as what's in the code. So transient, like I said, is a brand new definition. Any other questions?
No.
Is there a motion on Article 37?
Motion to support Article 37.
Second.
Motion made by Andrea, seconded by Megan to support Article 37 as proposed. Is there any further discussion or questions from the committee? No. Okay. By roll call, Andrea,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Great. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. Lori, before you move on, could you just change we're seeing the presenter view, or I'm seeing the presenter view. Could you just switch it so it's if you go to display settings, I think.
Maybe if I do the stop share. Oh, I see what you're saying. Do you see that now?
No, you're not sharing anymore.
Okay, now I got to get out. All right. Not exactly sure which one. If it doesn't work, then we'll just skip the PowerPoint presentation and I'll just go off my slides. What are you seeing now? Are you seeing the presenter view?
That's fine. I think this is fine. If you want to just scroll through them, okay. I think this should work. I can see it and read it.
The challenge is that I have dual screens, so I can see on two different screens. So I'm not exactly sure what you're seeing.
We're currently looking at Article 40.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go back up. So the next definition change is temporary structure. So originally the definition required a temporary structure to be removed within a 12-month period of time. So this change would increase the removal period of time to 180 days. And so essentially the article points to a certificate of zoning compliance versus an occupancy permit. So the certificate of zoning compliance is an occupancy permit where the zoning compliance is built in. So the town does not issue zoning compliance certificates on a standalone basis.
Lori, can you give me an example of what a temporary structure under this definition would be?
So a good example might be, let's see, so when you're doing a development, you may install like a contractor's shed on a temporary basis, just to be there kind of as an office for the contractors. So anybody who comes on site would go into this shed and they would discuss the construction project. And then when the construction is complete, it goes away.
And now I'm sorry. And now we're
go ahead.
limiting that to 180 days.
Correct. So that is what that's what the building code allows. So our zoning bylaws does not conform with what the building code allows.
Oh,
Would
so
there
you're
be
saying
any-
the building code was allowing 180 days and then we were bottlenecking it at 120?
We were bottlenecking it at, yeah, a 12-month period. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, no, I was reading that wrong. So we're cutting it in half.
Correct.
Oh,
which
oof.
seems wow. Like, I don't
Ouch.
know how you're going to do that.
Yeah,
And my concern also, and I'm sorry I'm speaking over you, Brian. When I look at, and I understand it's wording, but when I look at the occupancy permit, and that's fit for habitation, so most of these contractor sheds aren't hooked up to water, sewer, anything like that. So under the definition of an occupancy certificate, you don't have it because that is fit for habitation, which these temporary structures weren't meant to be fit for habitation. And I understand it's all about the language and trying to clean it up, but I don't feel comfortable with the way it's written.
Would there be any exceptions if a building project took more than 180 days? Would they, I'm just wondering, because many projects take longer, what would occur then?
Unfortunately, the building inspector put forward this modification, so I'm not sure. What I could do is I could ask him to jump on to this meeting, so maybe we could kind of set that aside. And then when he joins, he can answer your questions. Is that okay?
sure. We can table it for now. If we get to we'll wait for him until we get to the end. It's actually, I think that might be Becca's question to answer, but that's my opinion.
Craig, could you do me a favor, because I have to discuss the next item. Could you ask Bob to jump on?
No problem. I will, I'll reach out to him.
Okay, thank you. So then the next item is much easier. So that would modify the definition of a structure, and that specifically has to do with the height of a fence. So right now, a structure is defined as a fence that is 6 feet or higher. However, the building code defines a structure as a fence that is 7 feet or higher. So this would just bring the definition in line with the building code.
I'm sure it'll affect someone's day when we legally defence their fence, but as long as it's bring up to the building code, I'd motion to pass that one.
I will second.
So it means that they won't have to get a building permit if they're, or a special permit if they're installing a fence of less than 7 feet.
Oh, so they're welcome. Yeah, I motion to approve.
All right. So,
Lori, okay, so motion is made by Brian, seconded by Andrea. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
No,
No, okay. All those in favor by roll call, Andrea,
yes,
Megan,
Yes.
and Brian,
Yes.
thank you.
okay, so the next one, Article 40, is aimed, it's really a housekeeping issue. There's a lot of confusion even amongst the permitting authorities as to what special permit with site plan approval means. So what we're trying to do is clarify what it means. So essentially, what this says is that if you are submitting a development proposal for a use that is specified as a special permit use in the use table, then you are triggering special permit with site plan review. So there are certain decision criteria that are associated with that in the zoning bylaw. However, we have other types of special permits. So there are some uses, many uses, that are considered by right uses. So they're not special permit, they're by right. However, they may be located in a specific area of town that triggers either a groundwater protection overlay special permit or a floodplain special permit. So what this says is that in those circumstances where you have a by right use, you are not triggering special permit with site plan review. In those circumstances, you're triggering the normal site plan review decision criteria, and then you're going to the groundwater section of the zoning bylaw, and you're triggering the special permit criteria associated with groundwater. Or you're triggering the special permit decision criteria associated with floodplain. So it's really kind of mapping out what the criteria are that various projects are judged against. Anybody have any questions about that one?
I have no questions, and I will throw out a motion to support Article 40.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion made by Andrea, seconded by Brian to support Article 40. Are there further discussion or questions?
No,
Okay. By roll call vote, Andrea,
yes,
Megan,
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously in support of Article 40. Article 41.
Okay, so this one, a few years back, the Zoning Board of Appeals was granted authority to also do site plan reviews. So originally the authority rested with the planning board only. But in order to streamline the permitting process, essentially it said that if the special permit granting authority is the zoning board of appeals, then they are the ones who will do site plan review. However, the zoning board of appeals never adopted rules and regulations for site plan approval. They've been using the rules and regulations of the planning board. However, the zoning bylaw says that they need to have their own rules and regulations. So this modification would enable the zoning board of appeals to use the planning board's rules and regulations. So the membership of the zoning board of appeals have decided that the planning board rules and regs are good, they're well written, they're clear, and instead of just duplicating them, then they just want to use them.
Yeah, I can see the sense in that. I'll motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion made by Brian to approve, seconded by Andrea. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
I just have a question. What was the original reasoning to require them to have their own rules and regulations? Is there anything that is being missed by them not having their own rules and regulations?
No, it's just the wording. It probably harkens back to the time when just the planning board did rules and regulations, did site plan review. So it specifies that the special permit granting authority shall adopt rules and regulations. So like I said, they've been doing it since they were granted the authority. And this just makes it legal for them to do what they've been doing all along.
Any further questions? By roll call vote, Andrea,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
motion passes unanimously. Article 42.
All right, so the next one is aimed at putting a more reasonable size limit on accessory dwellings. So the way the bylaw is currently written is it ties the size of an accessory dwelling to the size of the existing single-family home located on the property. So it's 25% of the maximum gross area of the existing single-family home. However, there are some homes in Northborough that are very, very large. So the way the bylaw is written would enable pretty much a second single family home to be built on a parcel of land where the existing single family home is 4,000 square feet or greater in size. So the idea is accessory dwelling is typically a small apartment that is occupied by possibly in-laws or adult children, maybe a nanny. So it's supposed to be a small structure either attached to the single family home, or it may be above a two-car garage or within a barn. So by increasing the size to 800 square feet and eliminating the 25% gross floor area allowance, then you're really going to end up with an accessory dwelling that truly is an accessory dwelling.
I have a couple questions on that. So this is a dwelling, so barns and garages aren't counted under that, just the space someone might actually dwell in, correct?
Correct. Yep. So if you got a two-car garage down below, it would just be the gross floor area of the apartment itself above. So it would include closets, hallways, bathrooms, and spaces like that. So it'd be the gross floor area, but it would not include the area of the garage.
I don't know if I agree with the spirit of it, because the point of the dwelling is to dwell in it, and we'd be trying to limit the size that they're allowed to dwell in. I mean, I understand we have some really large houses, but I don't think we have to worry about those becoming giant, crammed slums if they're being added on to gigantic houses that people paid a lot for. So I don't think the spirit of it is needed for this one.
Well, the idea is, like, right now, we don't allow 2 single-family homes to be built on a parcel of land. So the way it's currently articulated, you could very well have 2 single-family homes on a parcel.
Has there been any indication if this will increase residency, and from the perspective of helping with the housing crisis that is occurring right now?
I think it's going to be neutral, because right now we already allow accessory dwellings. And most of the accessory dwellings are of a reasonable size. So I don't think that this is really going to be an impediment. If anything, it would just prevent 2 single-family homes from being located on a single parcel.
I'm just worried about if someone tries to add the second dwelling on top of their garage and it ends up, over 800, because I'm in 850 square feet. And I mean, it's not huge, but I think a decent 2-car garage might be bigger than that. So they just put something right above it. They might bump over slightly over 800 and get blocked out.
They can seek relief. So if, for example, they already had a space over a 2-car garage, and let's pretend it's 850 square feet. So then they would be able to ask for relief in order to do a slightly larger apartment. So that would be with the Zoning Board of Appeals.
So this would be a case where we set it as the norm, and that way we can actually look at case by case.
Correct.
But I think going from the 25% down to a maximum of 800 is going to really limit people on what they can do with the property that they purchased. And then if that passes and then they have to jump through hoops to seek relief, I'm not really in favor of this article.
Is 25%, is that 25% of the average single family home, or of the single family home that is currently on that property? So is it individualized?
It's the way it's currently written is it's 25% of the single family home that exists on the property. So if you have 1,600 square foot single family home, then you can get an apartment that's 800 square feet. So you can go up to 800 square feet.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
So the idea is
Yes, we hear you.
Is mostly to go after the circumstances where you have a very, very large building. So there are locations where there are very large single family homes in, densely developed neighborhoods. So they could be in the historic areas of the town. Back in the old days, people had 10 children. And so there are a number of single family homes that are quite large. So the way the bylaw is written today, if you had a 6,000 square foot, I'm going to do the little calculation right now. If you had a 6,000 square foot single family home, then you could build a 1,500 square foot single family home on the same parcel.
And that goes against the intent of the accessory dwelling unit. The accessory dwelling units are intended to be subordinate both in size and stature to the main structure of the property. Okay.
Which they would be.
Yeah, but at 1,500 square feet, that qualifies as an additional completely single house, and it goes against the intent of an accessory dwelling unit.
Bob, could you just introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm Bob Federico. I'm the building inspector, zoning enforcement officer. Sorry I'm late to the meeting. I never got the original invite.
Thank you, Bob.
I think we need Bob for 38, was it?
Yeah, well, we can jump back to that once you guys, if you'd like.
For Article 42, I'll do a motion to deny.
I will second the motion to deny.
Okay, motion not to support Article 42 by Brian, that's seconded by Andrea. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
No.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call, Andrea?
I'm in favor of not supporting.
Megan?
I'm also in favor of not supporting.
And Brian?
In favor of not supporting.
Okay, motion passes unanimously not to support Article 41 as written.
42.
42.
I'm sorry, 42 as written. If the committee would like, we can jump back to Article 38 now that we have Bob Federico present. If
That would be
works. Okay. Bob, if you could, the committee was discussing Article 38, which proposes some changes to the definition of temporary structures. And they were just looking for a little bit of background on the intent of proposing those changes, if you could.
Sure. What we've always done is try to get the building code and the zoning code to agree with each other. So it's not cumbersome for either administrators to administrate it or for users to use it in terms of the customer experience. Since there is no way we can change the building code, the zoning code is an easier change, although it's not always an easy lift. Temporary structures in the building and fire codes is limited to 180 days, which is 6 months. That has been the universal determinant for forever, basically. What we'd like to do is make that same arrangement with the zoning bylaws. I believe right now the zoning bylaws is what, 12 months?
Yes.
Am I correct on that?
Yep.
Okay, we're just trying to make it, the zoning bylaws agree with the building code to make life easier for everyone. It is very, very, very rare. I think I've had one experience since my tenure started here almost 7 years ago where that came into play. So, you know, in many ways, this is nothing more than a housekeeping situation. You know, whether it's 12 months or 16 months, temporary is supposed to be just that, temporary. And extending it out from 12 to 16 months, 12 months to 18 months, I think is reasonable.
Well, we're cutting it looks like from 12 months down to 6, but my main question from a legalese standpoint.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No worries. My main question is just were they already capped? Like, I know that zoning was giving it 12 months and then the building code was giving it 6 months. Were they already capped at 6 months from a functional standpoint this whole time?
Because from the building standpoint, yes. Yes.
Okay, so we're not actually cutting it down to 6 months. They were already at 6 months because of the building code the whole time. And
right,
this was just saying that they had more time when something else was already blocking them.
Taking it from 12 months to 6 months, okay, and making it agree with the building code. Like I said, it's just making it easier for everybody to understand and utilize, okay? I guess I don't understand the point of your question.
I'm just asking so essentially what I'm saying is, I'm asking if the zoning bylaw that gave them 12 months was never actually in effect because the building code was still capping them at half that time this whole time.
Well, if somebody wanted to push it, they could, you know, say, you know, and nobody's ever pushed it to me for this. They can say, well, the zoning says I've got, you know, 12 months instead of 6. Okay. I do have authority to extend the use on a temporary basis for another 6 months if they want to pull another building permit. But you and I both know it's common sense that whenever somebody puts up something temporary, and it's longer, they're longer for 6 months, it becomes permanent.
Yeah, if the building code was already in effect blocking this, then I'll motion to approve.
I think there's some other changes there too that we need to be cognizant of.
Okay.
You know, before the wording was just a permit or a certificate of zoning compliance, which we've already discussed that the town of Northborough has never issued a certificate of zoning compliance.
What is a certificate of zoning compliance is a permit to build or a certificate of occupancy. Those are combined together, but it has to be tied to a building permit. We don't issue zoning permits and we don't issue zoning compliance unless they're both tied to either a building permit or a completion or occupancy certificate from the building department.
Correct. Now you're making it a conjunction that it has to be a building permit and an occupancy certificate. And I think prior to you joining the meeting, the definition of the occupancy permit is something fit for habitation. And an example that was given is like a temporary contractor's shed. So that's clearly not fit for habitation. So I'm having difficulty blending the two, making it a requirement to have the building permit and the occupancy certificate, when what we had before was just, you need the permit. And it was intertwined within that.
Occupancy permits are designed for situations where people are going to occupy the building, whether it's a commercial or a residential. If you're building a garden shed, that's an accessory structure, and those will get what's called a certificate of completion. Okay? The certificate of completion, when I sign it off for a garden shed, also means that the installation of the garden shed meets zoning requirements as well.
Right. So in this case, it's a temporary structure that we're requiring someone to get a building permit and an occupancy certificate, and we're knocking it down.
No. It's not an occupancy. Say, for example, we do a tent at a restaurant outside. Okay, that would need a occupancy certificate because people are inside of it. Okay, and tents are not able to withstand the gravity of the roof forces during the wintertime. So those tents are not allowed to be up in the wintertime. So typically you get a 6-month permit on that. Okay.
Right, but would that permit be a building permit?
Yes, absolutely. Building permits encompass swimming pools, accessory structures, businesses, houses, flagpoles in some instances, signs. Let's see what else we do. Any kind of HVAC work, any kind of alteration to an existing building, temporary trailers, tents. There's a whole list of other things, but we don't require permits for fences as long as the fence hopefully is less than 7 feet tall.
So the occupancy permit isn't for long-term occupation. It's just saying that someone can occupy this area at all, like a tent. So it's not going to go into requiring, water piping or anything like that.
Occupancy permits are for permanent occupancy of a business or a home.
But these temporary structures are going to require occupancy certificates. Oh, no. Oh, so there's a difference between certificate and permit, you're saying?
There's a difference between a certificate of completion and an occupancy certificate.
Well, this bill's saying that temporary structures will need an occupancy certificate.
Is that what it says?
Yeah.
I don't have the paper in front of me.
Okay, yeah, it's changing it from shall require a permit or a certificate of zoning compliance, and it changes that term to shall require a building permit and a occupancy certificate. So that's what we're concerned with.
I would suggest that you add to occupancy certificate the words or a certificate of completion.
Okay.
And that should take care of it.
Yeah, the language is set in the warrant. It's been reviewed by the planning board and the zoning board, so it can't be modified.
So we'd have to send it back and
Right.
get it next year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
based on this, I would not approve this.
We'll send
As
it back
as
and
it's
we'll do it
written.
next year then. Make it a motion to pass over, we'll do it next year. I mean, it's not a life or death situation. It's not a dire situation. Again, this is something that's come up once in my tenure here of 7 years. So, it's not a real hot button issue. It's, in my view, it's more of a housekeeping issue. So, since it's not a big deal, I would say, have somebody make a motion of pass over and pick it up next year.
We can talk about that more, Bob. We have a motion on the floor by Andrea not to support Article 38 as presented. Is there a second?
I second that.
Motion made by Andrea, seconded by Megan. Is there any further discussion on Article 38?
No.
Hearing none, by roll call vote, Andrea?
I will not support the motion.
Okay, Megan?
I will not support the motion.
Um,
Or
you're
wait,
not-
is the motion
You
to,
support the
deny.
motion. Yes,
I
you
support the motion to deny it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I got it. I got you. Okay. Brian?
I support the motion to deny.
Okay. Motion to not support Article 38 as written passes unanimously. Okay. All right. Thank you, Bob, for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Sure, is there anything else you need me for?
I don't believe so, but I'll
Okay.
tell you what, keep your cell phone on. No, I think
Bob
we're
might
good.
be helpful for the next one, depending on what sort of question. So if you could just hang out for the next one, Bob, I'd appreciate that. Article
Sure,
43.
no problem.
So this article has to deal with a portion of the zoning bylaw that allows a new dwelling to be situated on the same lot or within the same building as an existing industrial use. So essentially, this is a remnant of the early industrial times when you had mill buildings. You often had a foreman or the mill owner located on the same property as the mill, and then you had worker housing all around the mill. So the reason why the mill owner often lived on the same parcel or the foreman was to oversee the mill and if make sure that there was no fire, no theft, oversee the workers and the like. So of course, modern times, now we have telephones, we have cars, we have security cameras, we have sprinkler systems. So it really isn't necessary for a caretaker to live within or adjacent to a manufacturing establishment or, whatever the case may be. So the purpose of zoning, when zoning was created to begin with, was to actually separate out industrial and residential uses, because as a whole, industrial uses aren't very compatible with residential uses. Most of the complaints that we receive are because residents don't enjoy living in close proximity to industrial uses. So this would no longer make it possible for dwellings to be constructed, new dwellings to be constructed within industrial buildings or on the same parcel as an industrial use. So if there is an existing situation, like for example, 172 Barefoot Road, I believe, or I might have the number wrong, that would be a grandfathered situation, and that situation could remain.
I believe there are two other places in town, Lori. This is Bob Federico again, that I know of that has a caretaker type apartment within a establishment. One of them is Motel 6 on Route 9. It's not a residential use, it's a hotel use, which is different. The other one that I'm aware of is the self-storage facility on Main Street, heading out towards Marlboro. I believe
Really?
they have a caretaker's apartment in that building as well. But like Laurie said, this is a use that's, kind of like a vestige of eons gone by, where you needed somebody living at the plant or the mill, for security and visibility and kind of a caretaker in the off hours. With the advent of technology and everything else, there's just no need for it.
I have one question about the existing situations clause. When we're grandfathering in existing situations, is that like grandfathering in people who currently live there, or grandfathering in the building itself and allowing it to stay? So like, someone inherits it or someone else moves in, that's still allowed.
Yeah, well, I'm going to back up just a little bit. Grandfathering is a term that people are trying to not use anymore. What they're trying to use is what's called pre-existing non-conforming. So anytime you have a zoning regulation that puts a restriction on a use that is currently in use, that use is considered to be pre-existing non-conforming, and that use is allowed to remain as the use. It does not go with that use enjoyment does not go away with change in a tenant.
Okay, cool.
Okay. The only way to get rid of a use that is pre-existing non-conforming is to somehow certify that use has been abandoned for more than 2 years.
Okay, yeah, that works. I was just making sure that we weren't going to make someone tear down a building or restructure their building over this a few years from now.
No.
So
no, the zoning laws give great deference to protecting pre-existing conditions.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve Article 43.
I will second.
Motion made to approve Article 43 is presented, seconded by Brian, seconded by Andrea. Is there any further discussion on Article 43? Okay, by roll call vote, Andrea,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 44.
All right, so the next one, this is largely owing to the fact that the planning board had quite a few concerns about the size of duplexes, in particular in certain residential districts. So the idea of putting in place a maximum lot coverage requirement is that you are regulating the amount of a parcel that can be covered by structures. And the definition of structures includes a whole variety of things, which I have listed on the slide. So for example, the single family home, the accessory dwelling, a garage, a barn, a shed, an enclosed swimming pool. So all of those things, when you take their footprints together, that goes into the calculation of lot coverage. So there's the minimum open space requirement, or the reverse of that is an impervious lot coverage requirement. So when we're talking about impervious lot coverage, we're talking about the footprint of all structures, and we're also talking about all paved areas. So that would include, a driveway, a parking lot, a patio, if it were like a concrete patio. If it's a pervious patio, so pervious pavers, then that would not go into the calculation. So the idea here is, like in many of the other districts in town, is to put in place that maximum lot coverage requirement to essentially ensure that you have open space.
Is this going to be just for duplex areas, or is this to every building in those districts?
So it would be for all
Everything.
properties within these districts. So regardless of what their use is. So this is residential A, residential B, residential C.
Is there a map of the districts, or was there a previous lot coverage cap that we're changing, or was it uncapped before?
It was uncapped before. So most communities have lot coverage requirements in all of their districts. Northborough is not one of those communities who had it in all of their districts.
Would this give a warning to anyone? Because I feel like, if someone bought a house and they were planning to build a garage and, they wanted to save up some money, so they weren't doing it this year, and we suddenly tell them they're not allowed to anymore, I feel like that's something we should give people warnings about.
So if you're in the smallest district, 20,000 square feet, it still allows you to have quite a large footprint. So 20,000 square feet times 0.3. So it allows you to have structures that have footprints of 6,000 square feet.
And that's the smallest one, so
very
okay.
large.
Yeah, that's
large.
fine then.
I have some concerns over the restrictions on it, especially when you're calculating in, the driveways and the patios and the
You're
in-ground
not.
pools.
No,
Those are
you're
not included? I'm sorry,
No.
okay.
Those would only be included within impervious lot coverage requirements. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about maximum lot coverage. So it's only the footprint of homes, say accessory dwellings, garages, barns, sheds, structures essentially.
Structures, okay. But again, it's also limiting the size of a building that you can put on there. So essentially the duplexes that builders were allowed to do before, this is now limiting them to, now you can't put a duplex, you can put a single family home up.
So on a residential C district, like I said, the footprint itself is 6,000 square feet. So you could have a 2-story building of 12,000 square feet. So that is an absolutely, a 12,000 square foot multifamily structure is many, many units. And multifamilies are not allowed in the residential C district.
So
So
that's kind of,
I can't imagine a 12,000 square foot duplex.
Wait, 12, wouldn't it be 6 in the 20,000 at 30%? Or do you count the building twice?
Because we're only talking about the footprint. The footprint is restricted by the lot coverage. So in our residential districts, usually we're talking about 2-story residential structures. So if you're talking about 2-story duplexes, you could have a building of as much as 12,000 square feet.
Oh, okay. All right, that makes more sense.
So the idea is, pretty much to have open space in between structures. So when you have, residential lots within neighborhoods, we don't want to see the entirety of the lot taken up by building.
Do we know where RC3 is? That's the only one I see that might get impacted, because RA and RB, I don't think we have to worry about those. 40,000 and 80,000, they're fine no matter what. The only one that could be affected at all by this is RC3.
Well, it's the residential C district. The 3 refers to a footnote that's in the dimensional chart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're talking about the residential C district. The zoning map shows where the extent of the residential C district. It's pretty much, I'd say about half the town. Maybe a good
yeah,
it's a very large area. So it's pretty much not the center, but it's all around the center. We have, of course, the zoning map is online. But I mean, do you want me to stop sharing my screen and find the zoning map? So
No, that's fine. I've gotten the idea of it.
Okay.
Make a motion in favor of the amendment.
Could you repeat that, Megan?
Sorry, make a motion in favor of the amendment.
Okay, motion made in favor of Article 44 as presented. Is there a second on the motion?
I can't support it.
I like the spirit of it because I'm against too many duplexes, but I can't. I'm sorry. Sorry, I don't like too many duplexes.
Is there an alternative motion?
I will do a motion to not support Article 44.
I'll second.
Motion made by Andrea, seconded by Brian, not to support Article 44 as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none by roll call, Andrea,
In favor of not supporting Article 44.
Brian,
In favor of not supporting Article 44.
and Megan.
Where do I see this? Not in favor, or in favor, not in favor of not supporting Article
Gotcha.
44.
Okay, so the motion passes 2-1 not to support Article 44 as written. Okay, Article 45.
Okay, we have another housekeeping item. So this article clarifies the minimum lot size requirement for parcels and buildings when they straddle 2 or more groundwater protection areas. So the location of the building within the district is key for determining the minimum lot area requirements. So no land area in a more restrictive groundwater protection area can satisfy the minimum lot area requirements for a less restrictive groundwater protection area. So this clarifying language is consistent with the long-standing interpretation of this bylaw. So this bylaw was adopted decades ago. And of course, there were consistent staff working for the town that was interpreting this bylaw. And then with staff turnover and new committee and board members coming on board, there was confusion as to how this bylaw should be interpreted. So the idea was to put it in writing. So that's what this does.
Yeah, reading through this, it looks like something that would definitely have already been ruled this way 100 times already. I'll motion to approve.
I second it.
Motion made by Brian, seconded by, was that Megan? Motion made by Brian, seconded by Megan to support Article 5 as presented. Is there any further discussion on Article 45?
No.
Yeah. Hearing none by roll call vote, Brian,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Andrea.
Yes.
Article 45 passes unanimously. Article 46.
All right, so this article would require utilities to be installed underground. So it would only be triggered in instances when site plan review was triggered. So right now, we already have in our subdivision rules and regs the requirement that whenever you're building a subdivision, you have to put the utilities underground, but we don't have this requirement for other types of development. So if you have a multifamily development, If you have a new industrial development, commercial, you are not required to put utilities underground. Now, of course, I arrived on the scene about a year ago, and I was super, super surprised to see that there is a town that still allows utilities to be installed above ground through telephone poles. It's very, very old fashioned. Most communities have required this for decades. So in a circumstance where you are building, for example, a new Dunkin' Donuts, so you would still have the above ground wires at the street, but then they would have to bring the wires underground at the telephone pole location, and they would go into the building underground. So of course, this looks better aesthetically. It's also widely believed to be safer. You know, of course, we live in New England and storms are a regular occurrence. So when you have the wires underground, then you don't have to worry about branches and trees falling on your utility lines. So that's what this one's all about.
I'll make a motion to approve Article 46.
I have a quick question before we do that, and I apologize for my ignorance. But does any new construction require site plan review?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Most, if it's a super tiny addition, or like change to a porch, then that usually doesn't trigger site plan review. But any sort of like major, if you are constructing 10 parking spaces or more, or I believe an addition of 1,000 square feet or more, or a new building, then you're triggering site plan review.
So if it's a new residential home,
that does not trigger.
That does not. So it's
Nope.
It's just commercial, or if you're doing the parking places or things. Okay, great.
Multifamily. So anything like special permit uses, for example, duplexes, multifamily, you know, new commercial or industrial buildings, mixed use buildings. That's the type of stuff that would be captured here. So if you're building a new single family home, you are not triggering site plan review. You don't have to put the utilities underground.
Okay. But a duplex, you would be required to put the utilities underground.
Yes, yes. So right now, that's something that we've been requiring as a condition of approval. So that wouldn't be a change. And the developers don't really push back on this because almost every other town in Central Mass that I'm aware of already requires it.
We have a motion on the floor for article in support of Article 46 as presented by Brian. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Motion made by Brian, seconded by Megan to support Article 46 as presented. Is there any further discussion or questions on Article 46? Okay, by roll call vote, Brian.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Andrea.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously in favor of Article 46 as presented. Article 47.
All righty. So right now, we don't have a mandatory setback requirement for driveways. So there are circumstances where we have driveways that abut one another. And that's not ideal for a number of reasons. People often like to have some sort of privacy in between driveways, and having some sort of mandatory setback requirement provide space for snow storage, for example. So that is the idea here. This is another thing that is often required in many, many communities. So instead of having two driveways abut one another, this would require a 5-foot setback. So where you have two new structures being built, there would be a 10-foot wide landscaped area in between. Of course, that's just in circumstances, again, where you're triggering site plan review. So if you're just building a single family house, then that's, oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm wrong here. This would be in the off-street parking and loading. So it would impact every new driveway being constructed. So if you have a current situation, then you would be grandfathered, but anybody who's building a new driveway would be captured.
Would this require developers to create smaller houses on narrow plots instead of taking up most of the plot for the house? Because if the driveways are so close together.
Yeah, we did talk about what do we do with side entry garages? And because of the mandatory setback requirements, so there are side setback requirements, we thought that it still would be possible to accommodate a side entry garage and comply with this 5-foot setback requirement.
So I think I heard you say, Lori, and I apologize, if you're building a duplex, like let's use the picture you're showing as an example. So it's 5 feet for each. So that center strip is going to be 10 feet wide. Is that?
No, not quite.
Total of 5 feet.
So it's 5 feet from a side setback. So if you have a duplex, then you have two units connected on the same parcel of land. So in that circumstance, you can have driveways. Like actually, we have a proposal that just went through design review this morning, and it was a duplex, and they're proposing a single driveway. And then they will have double entry garages. So double car garages, I should say. So it's going to be a 50-foot expanse of driveway in front of this duplex. So we're only talking about the side yard setback. So this isn't in between the two units. This is the duplex unit from its neighbor on the left side, and then from its neighbor on the right side.
All right, I'm just a little confused when I read on the what you had sent that says the rationale, the article requires driveways to be separated by a 5-foot grass strip. So I'm not reading that as a sideline issue. And maybe it's me and I apologize.
So the side lot line is the side yard line.
Okay.
So we're talking about the property boundary. So in this circumstance, we have, two houses that are located adjacent to each other. So there would be a line down the middle of this grass strip. So 5 feet of it would be owned by the house with the flag. And then the other 5 feet would be owned by this house. So if there were a duplex, and you know, these units were adjacent to each other, then they wouldn't need this grass strip. So it could just be the two driveways next to each other because they're on a single lot. So it's not a side lot line in between.
Is there a motion on Article 47?
I mean, I'm of the stance that if you're not allowed to use the 5 feet for your driveway, then why'd you pay for that 5 feet? So I can't approve this in good conscience. If someone else wants to, we can see how it goes. Otherwise, I would put a motion to deny.
And I will second that motion. I think I'm struggling with the same thing, Brian.
All right.
All right, motion.
Can I just mention one thing? One of the negatives is if you have your driveway directly abutting your neighbor's driveway, then your neighbor could drive and park on your driveway. You know, because the pavement is combined. So where do you demarc where your driveway starts and their driveway ends?
They could leave a centimeter if they wanted to, just for fun, but it's, I mean, it's their yard. They had to pay quite a bit for it these days.
And I think if you're buying into, and I keep going back to a duplex, if you're buying into a duplex and that's something that's in your bylaws as to who's responsible for it, what you're doing for upkeep, things of that nature.
This would not impact that whatsoever. So say you have a single family home on your left and you have a single family home on your right. So what this says is that your driveway has to be located a minimum of 5 feet from the single family home on your right, because that's where your driveway is located. So if the other neighbor, your driveway is nowhere near them. So the only one that's going to be impacted is the driveway on the single family home on the right. So instead of having your driveway directly abut their driveway, you would have a space in between, which is also helpful for stormwater mitigation. So there's a place for the water to go.
How often do builders want to put driveways close to each other? Is this something that occurs often?
No, it's usually a circumstance where you have an established single family home and then somebody wants to, you know, squeeze in a new home, and then they just go ahead and put their driveway right on top of your driveway. So I don't see a circumstance where a developer would choose to do that. I mean, there may be a grading situation, or there could be a wetland situation. And if there is a circumstance like that where, you know, the example that I provided you that we discussed with design review this morning, the driveway is squeezed between a fire hydrant and another driveway. So in this circumstance, they are putting the driveway up against the abutting driveway. If this bylaw change were to go into effect and there is an extenuating circumstance like, well, the entire frontage of this lot is wetland, and the only area that isn't wetland is maybe a 12-foot expanse to the far right. Then in that circumstance, they could go to the zoning board of appeals and ask for relief from the 5-foot setback requirement. Otherwise, you know, they'd have to give them a little bit of a buffer.
We currently have a motion not to support Article 47 with a second. Is there any further discussion on this article before we take a vote? Okay, Brian, how do you vote on the motion not to support Article 47?
Yes.
Megan,
No.
Andrea,
Yes.
okay, the motion not to support Article 47 passes 2-1. Article 48.
Okay. So right now in the town of Northborough, we allow both internally and externally illuminated signs. It's probably clear to everybody what the difference is between the two of them are. But this article would just add definitions for those two types of signs.
I'll do a motion to support Article 48.
Second.
Motion made by Andrea, seconded by Brian to support Article 48 as written. Are there any questions or comments on the motion for the article? Hearing none by roll call vote. Andrea,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Okay,
And that
motion
one was a lot
passes.
easier.
That was.
A motion passes unanimously to support Article 48 as written. Thank you. Article 49.
All right, so this one is a proposal to eliminate the groundwater protection, the groundwater advisory committee. So right now, the groundwater advisory committee has members that are appointed by the Water and Sewer Commission, the Conservation Commission, the Board of Health, the Planning Board. I think that's it. Oh, there's one.
The Board of Selectmen,
Oh, Board of Selectmen. Thank
the
you.
Select Board.
So this proposal would streamline the permitting process. So today, if somebody were interested in getting a groundwater protection special permit, they would have to appear before the Groundwater Advisory Committee. And then the Groundwater Advisory Committee would certainly ask questions, and then they would prepare a letter which would go to the Special Permit Granting Authority, which would either be the Planning Board or the Zoning Board of Appeals, depending upon the location and the type of project. So if the Groundwater Advisory Committee were to be eliminated, then instead of going through the step of appearing before the Groundwater Advisory Committee, they would just go straight to appearing before the Special Permit Granting Authority. So the applications right now, when the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Board receive applications, those are widely distributed to various boards and departments. And they're giving a particular period of time to provide comment letters or to provide comment during the public hearing before the Special Permit Granting Authority. So this would not really change, except that there would no longer be that meeting. So like the Board of Health, the Water and Sewer Commission, the Board of Selectmen, Conservation Commission, etc. So all the various members of the committee would still receive the applications. and they could opt on their own whether they want to submit comments or whether they don't want to submit comments.
So this isn't just cutting out the groundwater advisory committee, it's also cutting out the public hearing.
No, nope. Public hearing still occurs, but it's at the special permit granting authority. So normally the groundwater advisory committee, they don't hold public hearings, but they hold meetings. So what you're eliminating is you're eliminating the meeting where the applicant is appearing before this committee, and then the committee is directly providing feedback to the applicant at this meeting, and then putting together a letter, sending it to the special permit granting authority in time for their public hearing.
Okay. No further questions.
Would there be significant oversight lost by eliminating that step?
Well, of course, you're not going to have as formal a process for those groups to provide input. So they would have to take it upon themselves, essentially. So instead of having, you know, an agenda and an organized meeting, so Fred coordinates he's the staff liaison to the groundwater advisory committee. So instead of Fred arranging this meeting and, you know, meeting minutes and the like, that would all go away. So the various members of the committee, like for example, the Board of Health, they would have to take it upon themselves to educate themselves about the proposal. And then if they chose to submit comments, then they would write up a letter. So it wouldn't be Fred anymore. So they would write up a letter on their own, and they would submit it to the special permit granting authority, or they would have to attend the public hearing, say the ZBA, and then provide their comments directly to the ZBA. So like, for example, right now there's one letter that comes from the groundwater advisory committee, which encompasses the thoughts of the collective group. So under the new process, we could potentially get 5 different letters or none. You know, it would be up to the individual groups to comment.
I'll do a motion to approve Article 49.
Is there a second?
I think that something would be lost by eliminating the advisory committee in deference to the boards and the other commissions who would have to review them, leaving it up to someone to put more on their plate and educate themselves to it. I don't have a strong feeling for that, so I'm going to have to say that I could not approve or support Article 49.
We don't have a second, so is there an alternate motion that you'd like to propose, Andrea?
My motion would be to not support Article 49.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All right, motion made by Andrea, seconded by Megan, not to support Article 49 as presented. Is there any further discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, by roll call vote, Andrea.
Yes, to not support Article 49.
Megan.
Yes, to not support Article 49.
Brian.
Yes, to not support Article 49.
Okay, motion passes unanimously not to support Article 49 as presented. Thank you. Article, that's it. That's the end. Okay, excellent. Whew. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Fred. Thank you, Bob, for hanging out much longer than you needed to, but I appreciate it.
That's okay. If it's okay with you folks, I'll sign off now.
Yes.
Yes, thank you,
Sounds
Bob.
good.
Good
Thank you.
evening.
Thank you, folks.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night.
See you at town
Anytime.
meeting.
Okay.
So just so the committee is aware, in terms of next steps, I will put together all of the votes and the recommendations based upon your votes today. There'll be a handout that will be made available to town meeting that includes your votes. And then the moderator will read your recommendations on each article of which that you've taken a vote. So I hope that you all will join us on April 24th at 6 o'clock in the Algonquin Regional High School for town meeting. It is just expected to go more than one night, just so you're prepared for that. So if there are no further questions or comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will,
Yeah.
a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
No.
Hearing none by roll call vote. Andrea,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Thank you all for your time this afternoon. I appreciate it. I hope you're able to get outside and enjoy the nice weather.
Thanks.
Thank
too.
you.